The Vizoo xTex capture system creates physically accurate and seamlessly tiling digital textures for use in various 3D workflows. Today, I will demonstrate those capabilities using a couple different materials. Now, I am currently in the xTex software right now. I have the xTex A4 unit connected with USB. If I click my live view button, it brings up this little window here. If I open my drawer, I will place my first swatch here in the drawer. Close that up. And that looks good. I'll close this. I'll click my little preview button here. It's going to illuminate the swatch with a couple lights just to give me a preview so I can select what I actually want to capture. And then I can make my selection. So I don't actually want to capture this entire swatch. I don't need to because this is a fairly small repeating pattern. So I'm just going to capture maybe just a couple of repeats. So I have some options like that right there. When I'm satisfied with my selection, I can click the check mark. And it is going to automatically capture using various lights inside and controlling the exposure times and shutter speed and all that on the camera here to create all of those different textures that are used for PBR rendering. Now, as this is capturing, let's talk a little bit more about the hardware. As I mentioned, this is the A4 system, so that refers to the capture areas, the size of an A4 sheet. There is also a larger unit available in the A2 size. I currently have the Nikon D850 connected to this, but the Nikon D810 as well as a couple other models are currently supported, but they are all Nikon cameras. Also, I am using the widest lens that they recommend for this, for the A4 unit, which is the 35 millimeter. It gives me that full capture area, but you can swap out that lens for higher resolution, but smaller capture areas with a 60 and a 105 millimeter. They have lists of the official supported lenses on their website. So this just finished capturing. And if you look in the bottom left-hand corner here, it gives me a little bit of info about my captured area. It gives me my pixels and currently shows that with this lens and this camera, my captured swatch, it has a resolution of 657 dpi. So you can see that go all the way up to a little over 2200 dpi with the 105 millimeter lens on the Nikon D850. So very high resolution, but that will take your capture area down to a smaller area. So it's great for very intricate, small textures if you need to capture something like that. All right, so this is captured, but it's not currently tiled. If I look in the right-hand corner or on the right-hand side here, it lists all of the textures that it created. So I'm looking at the color map right now. It also created a normal map, an alpha map. So it does capture transparency, displacement, a couple different things here. All right, so in order to use this properly in a 3D workflow, most people want these seamlessly tiled. So I am going to come over into my tiling screen. And what we see here on the left-hand side is the what was captured. And on the right-hand side is a preview of what the tiling will look like. Now, of course, this doesn't look all that great right now because it's just a selection that I made without trying to be careful as far as where the edges lined up. So right now it looks terrible. But that's where the various software features come into play here. So there's a couple things you can do. You can manually select the repeat. So if we know that our repeat is something like this, and then we can kind of rotate the box a little bit. What's really nice is sometimes your fabric will be stretched or skewed a little bit. That's just kind of natural to fabrics to shift around like that. So you're not limited to just a square or like a parallel rectangle kind of shape. You can grab these corners and actually make odd shapes as well. So if your fabric is skewed, you can just bring those in to wherever the corners of your repeats are. Place them where they go. And you can zoom way in and fiddle with the corners as much as you like. So if we look at this, this is looking pretty good, but even so, if we zoom way in, you can see more of these harsh, you can see these harsh lines. Still, it still looks decent, but it's not perfect. So we can take this a step further and actually enable their automatic tiling algorithm. There's 3 different algorithms, and just standard stitching is the first one. So if I enable stitching, again, if we look at this on the right-hand side, my preview, if I zoom in, you can see where it's tiling. If I remove this grid, you can see these harsh lines here. If I enable automatic tiling, I'm just going to leave everything at the default for this one, and then zoom in here, you can see where it tiled. If you zoom way in, you can kind of see a bit of a jagged edge here, but that right there blends a whole lot better than if you have those harsh straight lines. So this algorithm is actually taking your selection and blending using their blending algorithms, taking inside and outside of your selection to try to blend all that together as seamlessly as possible. And you have some various accuracy sliders and stuff that you can adjust here, but that's looking pretty good right there. Now, if you want to view how this looks on a larger area, because that's when a lot of your artifacts and repeating pattern things come out, let's switch over to our 3D view. And I can bring up my shader settings and adjust my UV repeat to something really large and just see how that's going to look when repeated over a large area. And that's looking really good. When I'm done, when I've verified that that looks good, I can click the check mark. And what that is going to do is crop everything and output that selection that is ready for seamless tiling. Now, when I save this, let's just put it in this examples folder because I have 2 others that I'm going to show here. We'll just leave it at the default of material, click save. I have a few options enabled in the preferences here. It's going to output, since I have the Substance software on here, it will output a couple different things for you. Let's minimize this, look inside of examples. I'm going to show a couple of the other tiling algorithms using these other 2 materials, but here's the folder for that project I just saved. It automatically assigns an icon to that folder that gives you a material preview, which is really nice. I can double click on that, and inside you'll see the various outputs that are available when you save your project. So this is fairly new here. This is with their latest update. There is the NVIDIA MDL output, so that's available there. There is the xTex file format, your project right here that you can open up. So when you save your project, you can reopen this to adjust things if needed. Here are your 2 different materials. So you have a Substance Designer project file and a Substance Archive that could be dragged directly into Substance Painter. So it will output those if you have the Substance software already pre-installed on your PC. There is also a preview of the material here, and you can adjust the size of that in the preferences, so you can automatically output a preview of that. And then in the textures folder, you have all your various textures that can then be brought into whatever software you're using and tiled and rendered out. So you don't really have much of an export procedure. You just create your tiling, save the project, and all of this is output here. Now let's jump back into the software here, because I want to show just a couple other things before looking at their 2 other tiling algorithms. So in addition to tiling and all that, there are some adjustments that you can make. So maybe you're not very happy with the normal map. Maybe it's looking a little strong for you, or you've got some creases or something in your fabrics. You can actually come over here to the Adjustments tab, And there is a decrease intensity slider here. So I can actually adjust this, which you can see will decrease the intensity of the normal map. So there's that as an option. You can also digitally iron. This was called smoothing in previous versions, but you can actually adjust this, and I'll just go a little extreme here so you can see. And it will actually smooth out large variations. For instance, if you did have a crease across the middle of your fabric, and you didn't want that to show up in your normal map, then you could come in and digitally iron it. So it's got some nice little features here that you can use to adjust your textures, and of course you can do some color adjustment as well. Now, speaking of color adjustment, I hadn't mentioned this yet, but this is a color calibrated system. So when you first hook this up and open up the xTex software, you go through a calibration procedure. It does come with a calibration chart, but you can also use the X-Rite calibration charts as well, if that's something that you use. So basically the procedure is you place that chart in the drawer, go to Material, Scanner Calibration, and it does all that automatically for you. You would do that anytime you swap out a lens or shift the camera around, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's the first swatch. One last thing here. There is a recoloring tool, which is pretty cool. So let's come in here. Let's say that you had a swatch, had the same pattern, but came in multiple colors. Well, they have their recoloring tool here on the left-hand side. I can open this up. It will automatically find the colors. Now, if you know that it's only supposed to be, say, 2 colors, like in this instance, I can tell it to only use 2 colors. It will find those. It'll do an auto masking, and I can click on those and probably make a really ugly texture here, but let's just choose some colors. So you can see on the right-hand side, I changed the black to a different color, and then you can do the same here if you just want to swap things around. So you can change those colors out. Now, if you do have some swatches of various colors from a different program, you can import those in here, or you can just manually choose colors like I just did. And then when you're done, you can actually save this out as a different color in whatever format you want. So you could have all the other same materials and then change your base color and have variations where you're only switching the color and all your other maps are the same. So that's a pretty cool tool. All right. Now, I mentioned there were 3 different tiling algorithms. So the stitching is pretty straightforward. It's going to be very common for any kind of repeating pattern like this, where you have, maybe it's a floral pattern or some other print that is on your material. It works great for that. But what if you have stuff that's more along the lines of, say, leathers, or I have this screen cleaning cloth. So I have this leather here. I captured this earlier, but didn't tile it yet. And same with this screen cleaning or glasses cleaning cloth. Both of those are fairly small samples. Let's go ahead and open those up. Let's open the leather first. Again, I already captured these, but didn't do anything with the tiling. So the next algorithm I'm going to show you is what they call synthesis. What this is going to do is look at your texture and take a whole bunch of samples and tile them over, say, a 4K. It'll create a new square 4K texture based off of samples of your original. And you can adjust how many samples it's taking, where it's taking those samples from, and all that. Let's go into the tiling here. And this is excellent for cases where you have more of an organic type texture. Let's switch back over to the 2D view. So here is this leather that I captured. I'm just going to sample from the middle here. So there is just the regular tiling with no algorithms. If I enable this and then switch to synthesis, what it's going to do is sample from the selection that I have created. And by default, I believe if I expand the advanced, it is taking 150 samples out of here. and then randomizing it and tiling those and then merging them together over and creating a brand new 4K texture based off of your selection. This is going to come out looking a whole lot more natural for organic things as opposed to even just using, if you were to stitch the edges on an organic piece, even if those edges are seamlessly blurred or merged together, you'll still see odd repeating artifacts that your eye automatically picks up just because you have that same little piece repeated many, many times. So now if I come into 3D here, I can adjust my UV repeat. So you can see this is looking very natural from a very small selection. And I can adjust my glossiness here just so you can see, you can kind of preview what the normals are going to look like. So that is what the synthesis is for. Excellent for leathers and other more organic kinds of materials. Again, if I'm done with this, I click the check mark here, and then I can save that out. And then finally, there's one other algorithm that I want to show. This is the pattern recognition algorithm. So let's wait for that to finish saving and then drag that in. Pattern recognition is excellent for mechanical patterns where you have a very uniform repeating item, such as, say, a metal mesh or some other sort of mesh. But I like to show this little cloth here because it's actually a little bit more of it does have a repeating pattern, so it has fairly straight lines, but it's not just one same little piece repeated over and over. So let's come into the tiling screen here. Let me switch this over to pattern recognition. Come over to tiling. Okay. I don't need to sample from this whole thing. I'll just take a little from the middle there. And I'll adjust this a little bit because my cloth is skewed a little bit. Straighten that out a little bit. All right. So if you look on the right, this is without any algorithm. So, there's some very obvious repetition here. If I enable pattern recognition, it will grab what it thinks is something that should be repeated. So you can see this red selection. That's your original sample. And it will pattern it over a 4K texture. And that texture, I don't know if I mentioned this, that texture can actually be adjusted as needed to, say, 8K or 16K. Just know it's going to take a whole lot longer the higher you bump that resolution up. So here is this tiled using pattern recognition. Now this, while it looks good, it looks very unnatural. It doesn't look exactly like this piece. So that was using the default settings. That's because my accuracy bar here is adjusted, to the default, about 3/4 of the way up. If I adjust this down, it's going to loosen the parameters of what it sees as a repeating pattern, and it will start to sample additional sections of my selection over here. So let's bring this down. Bring it down to, say, under half. You can see the original red here, and then it's going to sample, and by default, up to 100 additional patches that it will then pattern over that texture that it's creating. So you'll see in a minute, it's building it out. You can see it sampling randomly here over this texture. And it will reproduce something that is much more natural looking and looks a whole lot, or not just a whole lot more, but exactly like the original source here. So now if I look at this, it looks very, very symmetrical with straight lines like it's supposed to, but it has that additional organic variation because it was able to take multiple samples from my selection. And we can jump over to 3D here. Adjust my UV repeat. And this internal viewer doesn't take into account the maps that you were capturing. It's really just for adjusting so you can look at how your general material has tiled. So if I want to look at my normal map a little bit more. Maybe I just add a little bit of gloss to this, even if that isn't the way the material looks, so I can kind of see how the light reacts to this. And that's looking really good and really natural. When I'm done, I'll go ahead and click the check mark and let that save out. So what I'm going to do here, I will save out these 3 different examples. The downloads will be available in the description. In addition, I am going to do these same samples with the higher resolution lenses and also make those available for download as well. So that is the xTex capture system. If you have any additional questions or would like maybe to see some specific swatches captured, feel free to reach out and we will love to help you out.